So the next slide is indeed announcing our keynote speaker of today. We will not talk too much about the project as such, but on the impact it has and on the people who shape it. And that's not only us as partners, but also the people we invited today. And one of them is Elke. So very welcome, Elke, again. She will challenge us a little bit today with a keynote on what is it all about, regenerative tourism? Are we serious? What does it mean? How does it take form? So Elke, the floor is yours. Very curious to hear your thoughts.
Thank you so much, Isabel and Andreas, for the introduction. It's an honor to be here to kick this interesting conference off. To answer your question, Andreas, I'm also from Belgium, very close to Isabel right now. So you see many things are flourishing in Belgium, but actually I work around the globe. So I'm happy to share examples from different parts in the world. And the second question, I feel very much alive because I followed a course on regeneration. It had nothing to do with tourism, but it was super interesting. And I'm going to be very honest with you. The more that I think and talk about regenerative tourism, I ask myself, are we serious? Because seriously, is regenerative tourism not a contradiction? And I'm talking here about those two words, regenerative, regeneration, which occurs only in living systems, and tourism as we know it today, like an industry and a sector of subsectors, transportation, accommodation, and you name it. And I don't want to have a keynote about semantics, but I do think that for all of us in this community here today, words do matter. And I'll try to explain what I think about this during the presentation. But first, and very important, I think, is to acknowledge that nobody here is an expert. I think we're all learning here, we're all unlearning. And I think this is maybe the most difficult part because everybody can learn, but unlearning is really challenging. And I want to share what I've been trying to unlearn. And it goes back actually like what happened 100 years ago. Remember the roaring 20s when everything became possible? I think this is the start really of what we call tourism as an industry. Of course, people have been traveling as long as people exist, and hospitality has been there as long as people live because it's in our nature. But tourism, when we talk about this thing, I think it started off with people having more leisure time, people having money, the payé congé, as we call it in Belgium, the paid leave. They had the opportunity to go away from home. They had Ford, who was building cars and buses, and even the first Atlantic flight was made possible after the First World War. So this was 100 years ago, the decade of many possibilities. And I think here's where the real tourism industry started. And if we look back at an image of, Belgian coast, I stay in Belgium for now, this is what a day excursion looked like. So you could only rent this carriage to undress or to dress up in your bathing suit. You still had two views. You had the seaside view, and then you have the view that you see here. You could see the nature, the dunes back then. And tourism was not really established well. You could not buy an ice cream. You could not do those other things. And that changed when mass tourism came to life, I think. And this was after the Second World War. So tourism became an industry. We got tour operators. We got accommodation here. People could stay and afford to stay longer. 1 week, 2 weeks in an apartment, in a hotel. We lost one view. We only see the seaside view, and then the other view looks like this. And it's the same in Spain, in Belgium, even in the Netherlands, it now starts looking more and more like this. And if you think about this 70s, 80s image, and you think about today, often tourism is featured in this way. If you look at newspapers, articles today, you often see still these images, and you start thinking, what else do we see? We are starting to see the consequences. The short-term rentals, it's not only owned by people, but we are starting to see the consequences of this mass tourism. Now, the good news is, and here's how I try to start to see things differently, because if you are looking at things differently, that things are starting to change. And what really opened up a new world for me was looking at how you can look at the world in different ways. And to give you a completely different example, some people who live on this planet think that the world is a mystery. They are following spiritual leaders who help them to understand the world and also to show them directions of what to do. So this is like the spiritual world. It seems a bit far away, but it's there. And you might know some people who are following spiritual leaders. You might also think that the world is a jungle. And again, it's not imagination. It's there. In some places of this world, the law of the strongest rules. Now, I've put here in orange how we see the world today, I think, in the most dominant way. So by the most people on Earth, the world is seen as a marketplace, a place where supply meets demand, and where we all compete for the same consumer as demand. Now, if we talk about regeneration, there you start seeing the world as a living organism. And I think this is really exciting. So if you ask me, how do I feel alive? I feel most alive when I really acknowledge and understand that we are not above nature. We are part. We are together with nature. We are together with animals. There's no hierarchy. We're all in the same big world, and we all try to do our best, create added value in our own best possible way. And I think that can really make people flourish and thrive. We're all in the same thing here, and our consequences have an impact on others. And so if you look at this paradigm, if you look at the world as a living systems, you're not following rules. You're not following the rules of the market. You're not following the rules of the leader. You are following principles. I think this is really important to see before starting to develop the regenerative mindset. And so I think it's also important to unlearn what we have been doing since 100 years ago. And that is to look at travel as a market of supply and demand, where these rules are dominant. It's transactional, it's competitive, it's producing as much and as cheap as possible to create the demand. And it's also externalizing the costs of what it generates. And it can lead to an unrestrained self-interest. So we are more or less aware of it, but I really want to stress it. This is how we are looking at tourism mostly today. And even remember COVID, that would change completely how we look at tourism. Remember those days, there was no one traveling, and we agreed that travel would look completely different. Now, this idea of the world as a marketplace is so strong that immediately the organizations like UN said, no, here are the rules for recovery. This is what you need to do, and these are market rules. So what did we do? Everyone, every region started following those same market rules. And you remember these things. And even today, we are 2026. And I read this report from CLIA, which is the Federation of the Cruise Line Industry. They say that we have recovered well, we are moving beyond recovery, and we are aiming at structural growth. So you see the rules of the market. You see that volumes are expanding. So what do? We increase capacity. We create more cruise ships, and there will be more people. There will be a diversification of the market, but there will be more people traveling this way. So if we think that, tourism is broken, or if we think that tourism no longer exists, I think it's very much alive too. And I think as a group, we need to acknowledge this. We're not like We cannot fight tourism. Tourism is really flourishing too as a market. And there's many forces here that trying to protect tourism. Of course, the crisis recovery plans did not help. Some, like airlines, cannot just change their whole business model. It's based on volume. They are locked into this business model and system. So we need to understand it's not going to disappear. Some businesses really believe strongly in this market narrative. And also they say that the customer wants it. And I think we also need to acknowledge this, that consumers, after COVID, they also wanted to return back to as much travel as possible. I call it revenge travel. So it's a reality I think we cannot ignore. Now, of course, there's many people that are thinking like, yeah, but we cannot continue like this. So if we want to continue with tourism, we need to put some restrictions. But please try to understand that we're still in that same worldview as a marketplace, but we're only putting in restrictions. So we say we need to reduce our impact, we need to manage. So you hear these things, these words like managing dysfunction, restricting, Airbnb, for instance. So we hear these narratives, and I don't need to tell you this, the world is on fire. So of course we need restrictions in this tourism model. Everybody agrees, booking.coms agree, they're saying it needs to become an industry standard, but it's still the industry model that we're talking about here. Although some try to name it differently or use different words. Now, you see here on the left-hand side, a publication that I found yesterday of the European Union. It's a European project. They're thinking about building a sustainable and competitive tourism industry. Now, competition is a rule of the marketplace. It's not regenerative. And even if we use words like reimagining tourism, often it is discussed by people that are within the tourism system. The airlines are here. I think it's from Greece, agent. So you see all of us, all of the stakeholders that are working within the tourism system are trying to reimagine, but they're looking inward. So it's actually, how can we protect tourism as we know it, but put restriction, make it more sustainable, and yeah, try to continue as we are. Now, I would like to stress that if you want to look really differently at travel, we cannot start from that inward-looking mindset. We cannot start from the existing and make it better. It's not about improvements. It's really about transformation, and it needs to start from something that is not there today. So it needs to start from the potential, from what could this be. And I learned from a good friend, Asta from Iceland, and she got this from the regenerative farming people, that when you really want to change your minds, when you really want to look differently and at a different paradigm, it requires lots of efforts on the mindset and the design. While we like to talk about the practice and look at this, and this is a good example. I'm sorry, Andreas, we're doing it today too, but this is really the small 10%. We need to put efforts into the changing mindset and changing the design. Now, I want to look and take you to a completely different example that is for most of us unimaginable, and that is traveling virtually. I think our generation, including myself, we cannot imagine that we could only travel with a headset on our face. We're already discussing a meeting now via Zoom, and we prefer the human contact. So it's just unthinkable. But if we look at one practice, and then I invite you really to feel and feel the energy that these people here who cannot travel physically are experiences, because it has been proven that it's good for their health. They're seeing all the positive effects that tourism can bring here. And I mean, you cannot imagine what they can see. They can even smell. So technology is really advanced, and it's helping them to get the positive power of tourism. And you know what? there's no negative consequence. There's no CO2 emissions. So we're not reducing anything. So it's a completely different idea of traveling. But for us, we're not ready, I think, for the mindset. The design is not there. Think about this design. So who are the players in this field? It's going to be the technology platforms. It's going to be the metaverse. It's what is the business model for a destination? There's probably no tour operator. And so you see how many things change in the design of this completely different virtual world of traveling. And then I'll take you where you want to go to the regenerative mindset. So if we are thinking about traveling in a regenerative way, it's not about what is there and trying to protect it or even trying to restore it, because some people say we need to restore things. It is what it was, and we don't want to go back. Nature doesn't go back. If a forest is burned, then we do not restore the forest. So nature always starts from new. So it's really about creating places and communities that have the capacity to evolve towards increasing states of health and vitality over time. Now, this mindset comes with many ingredients, and I'm sure you'll discuss more about this, but it's really about seeing yourself as part of a whole, seeing yourself as in relationships with all these other parts and being connected, interconnected. So what you do matters, because otherwise all the rest will fall or will have an impact on each other. It's about mutually beneficial relationships, which today in travel are not always there. It's again, I told you about potential and development. It's about creating the capacity for places to flourish. So you need to start from what makes this place unique. And I think also an important difference with the worldview that we have today is it's not only about the outcomes. It's really about the process. It's about valuing the indirect effects, which are often much bigger than the direct effects. And so if we think about what is the impact of this way of thinking on the design of what we are doing, and I think this is really crucial, because here it breaks somehow with tourism. Because if you think in a regenerative way, you start from place and you don't start from tourism. Because if the place will not get more flourishing or better or reach its potential with visitors, then I think you don't start with tourism. So it's really about the place or about the community and what they want and what they think could help them flourish. And luckily for us, often it is visitors who can play that role, who can help places to thrive. So I think we really need to start from that place and place potential, and we need to engage with the host community. And I'm really excited that every time that I see, because I work as a consultant, every time that I see a tour operator or a hotel chain or a destination or a place asking to start with the host community, I'm thinking, yeah, we're making real good progress. And so this is something that the Destination Canada asked us. So of course, Destination Canada, they need to promote tourism, so it's clear, but they also ask, do something that will enrich the lives of the locals. And so here you have the power, you have the opportunity to work with a host community and let them decide and let them talk and dream about the potential for their place and how they can become better before talking about tourists and visitors. Now, in this case, it was very tricky because we needed to work with US citizens and Canadian citizens, and it was at the time that Trump announced that he would make Canada one of the US states. So there was a bit of pressure there. But to be very honest, it didn't prevent us from doing our work, because it was not a host community of Canadians and Americans, it was actually a place of different indigenous communities who have been living there for 10,000 years. So they are really, what we say, rooted in the place. They know every little corner of the place, and they also know where to go, where not to go. And they really have a good sense of what is healthy and what is not. We also discovered that it's not really a little area in the US and a little area in Canada that we needed to connect. No, it's actually one bioregion. It has the same ecology. It has the same climate challenges and the same social and cultural fabric. So it was very much aligned. And I think if you can find this within one host community, it's also easy to see what connects them and what they think about what is really important for them to become a healthy and vital area. So for them, in this case of Juan de Fuca, it was really about creating a healthy Salish sea, because that would create healthy salmons, and the salmons would create healthy food, but also healthy outdoor recreation and all these things. So once you get into the host communities, the things that they really appreciate, that they really think is important for them, it's not really difficult to see how visitors could contribute to that. Now, this place identity, in many places there are no indigenous communities there, so you cannot, rely on their wisdom. But of course, you can always investigate what is this place really about, what makes it unique. And this is, I think, a very important start when you think in a regenerative way. And it's not what makes a place unique. It's really a combination. It's a blueprint of all these aspects of a place. And I'm not going to talk about this because Tina will later on, but I think fascinating things are happening in Finland. There's many people who have been working there from University of Lapland on regeneration. And I think we can really learn a lot together to further evolve this mindset. Now, you might think that this is maybe the most easy example because Hawaii has a really strong sense of place. They have what they call a belief that if they take care of the land will take care of them. They call it malama aina. And I think they're also very good in trying to open up or create experiences in which the visitor can experience this and can also help to take care of the land. It's very it's very interesting also to learn from them, and I think they're really doing great things. But also at the same time, this is also Hawaii. This is Honolulu, and it's a picture from 2018 when they were celebrating their lantern celebration. So it's actually for the local people, but you see also there's like many visitors. It's a bit overcrowded. They have indeed many tourists. They have many pushbacks from the residents, and that's also a reality. So I think also for us as a group who are developing beautiful or trying to develop beautiful regenerative experiences, we also need to see tourism I've been talking about is also there. And the work that we've done for Hawaii is mostly about this. It was mostly about the dominant tourism and trying to transform that because it's necessary for those regenerative approaches to build up. So they have this, they have this Malama Aina, they have great regenerative experiences, but it's only marginal at this moment. It's only small, and we need to encourage the growth of these regenerative approaches in places. But in order to do that and to stimulate that, we need at the same time to transform the Honolulu tourism. So what did we do? And this is where everything comes together, and I hope you will see where I'm going. 4 years ago, we started with making a case for a new governance. So what it means is that the state of Hawaii was actually very much top-down, deciding how tourism would look like on the islands in the archipelago. The state actually made the strategy, and the state had the subsidies, and the state was deciding. This governance study made them realize that they also needed to turn it around, and they needed to listen to the islands and to what the specific islands needed to flourish, what the communities on this island needed. So they needed to shift their governance model. And that took us already 2 years. Now, the last 2 years, and we're still finalizing, we've been working on the strategy, because the strategy of the state was in the last year also a lot of the time based on volume. So we tried to make them see that spending less efforts on the arrivals in order to make sure that tourism can flourish, because if there's too many arrivals, then it will not work neither for those regenerative approaches to grow. And so what I mean to say here is that I think that it's something completely different, the way that we look at tourism today, which I call the dominant tourism, which needs to be somehow transformed, and maybe some practices will fade out, but a lot of things need to be transformed, need to be restricted, if we call it that way, need to be made more sustainable, and lots of efforts are going into this direction, lots of money, lots of people working on this, and I think it's also necessary. And I think it's not helping us if we say, well, this is not regenerative, this is not good. No, I think it's super necessary. But at the same time, and that's why I think you're here, we need to start building up those new approaches in places. And that's why I don't call it tourism. I call it approaches. I call it a different way of traveling. And if we can all work on this and make that bigger, I think, this might be the way to look at the new world of travel. So to end up, I would like to thank you for developing the capacity to co-evolve here with the Erasmus project that you're running, the EU project that you're running. And I want to end also with saying that I like the name Flourishing. And I don't think that many people know, when I was working in Flanders and we developed a vision of travel to tomorrow, we started off with saying regenerative tourism, but then nobody understood us. So we just renamed it and we called it flourishing tourism. And I think, whatever it is that helps us, I think words do matter. And I think I try to make my point here. We need to see the difference between tourism and regenerative approaches. But, to make it flourish, I think we just go for it and we develop any capacity that we need to get where we want to be. Thank you so much. If you want to read more, I think most of the things that I talked about are mostly in the book that I wrote about the transition in tourism. But because there's so much enthusiasm about people who really want to start from place, want to generate places instead of working on tourism, we're also organizing a conference next year, which might be interesting for everyone in this project. And you're very welcome. And I'm looking forward to the next speakers and discussions in this session. Thank you so much.